Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to another week of lockdown. Welcome to the COVID-19 Small Business Response and Support Centre. I hope you all have had a brilliant Easter. For any of you joining us on the Facebook Live, put some comments into the comment area. Just let us know how your Easter was, etc. Hopefully it wasn't too disruptive and you had some great downtime with the family and stuff. If you're watching this on the webinar, you have a Q&A function which will allow you to actually ask any questions that you want. So this week we're going into three key areas: high performance teams, digitization, and disruption. Disruption is one of those that I really like talking about, but we're starting off the week really on a high curve. Basically, I've got a really great set of experts in our resident expert peers and our guest expert Ryan Wellmans, who I'll introduce very shortly. So today we're really going to be talking about effective digital strategies. So you may have heard or read in recent publications and blogs and stuff as such that a lot of people are falling away from marketing and digital visualization, etc. Purely things like advertising and marketing, purely because I think it's a bit distasteful, or the fact that COVID-19 is not the kind of period of time that you should be effectively selling your services to anyone. But we're going to discuss this a little bit today. I think there's a mass opportunity here for people to actually get on and start to continuously build not only just their funnels but the relationship with their clients. We talked about this last week in some of our conversations, and today I'm really pleased to have, as I say, Ryan from SoPro on to talk more and more about digital strategies. Ryan, how are you?
Very good, thanks, Ketan. Very good.
Good. For everyone out there, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about SoPro, please?
Sure. So yeah, I run SoPro day to day. I'm the CEO of the business. Founded SoPro nearly 5 years ago now. We're a direct outreach agency. We provide predominantly email-based prospecting for a few hundred clients now. It's obviously a digital format, and yeah, we've got a pretty broad range of businesses, everything from enterprise tier right down to kind of boutique businesses with 5 or 10 people in the business that just need help identifying and engaging with the right people in the right businesses, and we package that up as a neat service and offer it to help businesses engage their markets.
Amazing, and thank you for joining us today as well. So I really appreciate you taking the time, because I know you've got loads of things coming on and you're very busy with the work that you're doing. I'd like to also introduce Piers. Piers is one of our resident experts, and Piers, I guess a lot of people that are watching our webinars know who you are, but for those who doesn't, could you give us a very short introduction as well, please?
Yes, great. Well, good morning, Ketan. Thank you once again for inviting me to join you and Ryan today. So I'm Piers Munnery. I'm an entrepreneur for about 25 years. I've kind of grown in and out of the marketing industry and been pretty much on the sales and marketing front end for many years, and done quite a few businesses, bought companies, sold companies, always with an edge around go-to-market. So I'm fascinated by the way digitalization has evolved, and delighted to be here. So thank you for having me on.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, guys. So, our time is going to be short because we do kind of try and crunch these to the hour, and there are probably going to be different areas and elements of the conversations that come through. And don't forget that, there could be questions that will be coming in to us as well, which I'll be throwing at you guys. So let's kind of get stuck into this. I think from a contextual perspective, Ryan, I'm going to come to you really quite quickly, quite fast. COVID-19 has had, everyone talks about its unprecedentedness and what it's done as an impact on businesses and all this kind of stuff. Facebook has seen a sharp decrease in the amount of advertising that people are doing on Facebook, which means that it's kind of a cost per lead is very cheap at this moment in time. There have been reports that I've read about 80 to 85% of consumers thinking that it's a bit distasteful to be promoting your services to a market space. From your business perspective first, have you seen a decline or a slowdown in the amount of people or businesses coming to you saying, right, we want to do some marketing activities during this period?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So, and the answer is broadly yes, we have seen a decline. We've seen a decline from certain existing clients. So, I mean, let me give you an example. Clients in the event space, for example, events for the next 12 months are cancelled. You know, what is the value of going to market with a proposition that's really not operationally deliverable at the moment? So there's been some immediate drop off. That's drop off in existing client activity, drop off in demand as well for new clients. Conversely, there's been pockets of the market that are spiking at the moment. Yeah, there's a lot of upside in certain industries, new industries cropping up. You know, there's just it really depends kind of who you are and what you do, really. I think there was initial trepidation around the kind of tact and sensitivity side of it. Is it okay to send somebody an email right now that, you know, that might be firefighting or might be dealing with, you know, potential redundancy situations in their business? And I think it's there's been a transition. It's been a monumentally rapid transition, because I think you mentioned where are we, day 20 or so in the lockdown at the moment. I mean, you know, it feels like forever, but actually it's probably less than a month in, and you know, you've got businesses that have gone, you know, pretty much right the way through this sort of realization curve. You know, have already readjusted propositions in some cases, totally recalibrated the language that they're using in their marketing messaging, even, you know, put new areas of their websites to support different you know, kind of pandemic associated sort of quirks of their industry. So yeah, it's broadly there is a decline, but it is, you know, there are huge opportunities in lots of different verticals right now.
And what's interesting, I mean, obviously you come at this from the kind of prospecting perspective. You're by and large, you are a marketing company, you know, in that sense. You help generate visibility, you help generate leads. More than anything else, you're actually encouraging conversation in the work, in the way that you do things. Why do you think it's really important that businesses don't lose sight of the fact that they should be still conversing out there? Because I've spoken to a number of companies who are like, no, I don't think it's the right time to try and get new clients in. Last week, we were talking about this, and the advice the experts were giving is that it's important to still have those existing conversations with your existing client base, you know, knowing that you're there, even if you're not doing business to a certain extent or generating revenue. You know, you still got to have a kind of presence here. So what kind of advice are you giving to your current clients and any kind of prospective business owner out there that's saying, I'm not too sure if we should be having these kind of conversations right now?
Yeah, well, you've got to make a decision. So I would say, regardless of whether, you know, some businesses have had a positive effect from the situation, certain others, you know, probably more so, others have had negative experiences so far. Whatever it is, every business that we've spoken to has been affected one way or the other, and I think in a lot of cases they've lost business from certain clients, you know, certain pockets of the market they service. In some cases gone offline more or less overnight. So you've got a requirement there to replace that client deficit in a lot of cases. And if you're, you know, either delaying that, pushing it back into the long grass, you know, we'll sort that out once everything's unlocked. You know, that kind of attitude, I think, has got a danger of being caught short if there is an extended lockdown, for example. I mean, you know, we've all got a sense, I guess, privately of how long we think it might take, but it, you know, it could be 3, 6, 9 months. You know, if you've kind of taken the strategic decision to look at the business development clawback after the event, you're quite susceptible to if things really do prolong. And I think there's the other side of it. If you've lost a lot of business right now, replacing it is urgent. Or you are going to need to be thinking about downsizing your business. So that's, I think there's an immediacy to kind of keep prospecting, keep at it, keep at the market. So we've got there's an adage in the sales team just within SoPro that the prospecting that we do today, it keeps our pipeline busy for the next, at some point, the next 90 days. The people that we speak to today are going to land as clients. You switch your new business activity off for a month, that's going to hit you over the next 2 to 3 months. You're going to see a severe, potentially a 30% decline in sales over that period. If you switch off for longer, you can see the knock-on effects, and you're giving yourself a real problem in the post if you're putting the marketing off. So just, I think as long as you're tactful, as long as you are adjusting to not, and I think people are naturally doing that. You've got to keep marketing. Businesses depend on their pipeline in all cases, really.
And Piers, just to bring you in on this a little bit, and I think there was a little bit that you said, or there was a piece in there, Ryan, that you mentioned about the fact that switch off your marketing, and you're kind of looking at a potential downward spiral or a further loss of around about 30% of your business. One thing that I also, as we start to come more towards recovery of this situation, you're going to have more and more people coming back into the market. So it's going to become increasingly difficult for visibility. It will be tougher to get to your target audience because there's more and more people now wanting to talk to them, and the cost of advertising and being visible to these prospective clients is going to be much more expensive. So Piers, just taking in what Ryan's been talking about the adage of continual marketing and maybe being a bit more tactful around what you're saying, how you're prospecting, how important do you see that as the fact that it should be something that you do as a business continuously now, even though maybe this isn't the right time?
Yeah, it's a real dilemma, this one, and I subscribe to repetition is reputation. So you've got to maintain some continuity in your marketing. And I think what we've got to accept is that what's happened to the world, and not just the UK and businesses, we've had a huge event that has hit us. The majority of people that I've met in the last 2 to 3 weeks have been in this sort of shock and denial mode. And what we've got to try and do is recalibrate, assess, and use our judgment to figure out what is appropriate. And yes, we need to maintain consistency here, but we've got to adjust and adapt. And we can't do exactly what we were doing before, which is if you were a high volume, email, telephone, digital prospecting machine, then yes, it probably is inappropriate to contact somebody who's just lost all their business overnight and say, do you want to spend some more money on marketing? So it's about, I think, a measured approach to it. I think it's about using your judgment, where you've got to accept, fundamentally, most businesses have a change in priorities right now. So the priority is survival for a lot of companies, which is looking at the cash in the bank. What do I do to shore up my cash? What do I do to protect my existing business? And that's not the time to be marketing. But I think ultimately, yes, you've got to market your business and you've got to maintain continuity in doing that. For myself, what I've chosen to do is, rather than actively prospect my business and actively go out and sell to people, I've chosen this as an opportunity to show that I care and to show that I can build relationships with people. So the marketing approach is light touch, regular communication, checking in with people. How are you doing? We're 25 days into lockdown now, and it's pretty unbearable for a lot of people. I know I'm going stir crazy. I'm sure we all are. But use your judgment, show some compassion, and accept the change in priorities that people have, and just change the questioning, change the word. What is it you're talking to people about? So understand their needs and where their priorities are now. But marketing is about relationship building. It's about maintaining continuity with a relationship. So I'm advocating, get out there, market your businesses, exactly as Ryan says. If you do stop marketing altogether, you will see a slowdown in your sales pipeline down the road. Just change the emphasis and the narrative a little bit.
This is great. Change the narrative, change the emphasis, change the focus. Ryan, I mean, obviously, the way in which you guys work is you use a lot of email communication as a part and parcel of the process of prospecting. How have you seen the communication or the style of communication change over the last couple of weeks? You know, as a business that provides this kind of prospecting service, have you had to change the strategy and the for your clients? And have you seen that, you know, I suppose the communications that's coming out a lot more empathetic than they were kind of, I wouldn't say aggressive, that's the wrong word, but are you seeing that there is a kind of a change in approach right now?
Yeah, so there's a change across the board, and I think the wording in the email, the tact and the way that things are being presented, I mean, perhaps that's it's one of the more subtle and one of the softer touches. But for us, that's really the last mile of the process, to be honest, in most cases. And yeah, so I'll talk through you know, a couple of examples. So businesses that so we've got lots of clients that are faced with the realities of needing to readjust their entire operating model in some cases, but certainly the proposition that they're putting in front of their prospective client base. Training companies, for example, you've got to go digital or go home right now, and there's really no middle ground. So we've got kind of very rapid. We're supporting very rapid transitions from an offline world into the online space. The supporting collateral that goes with that. In a lot of cases, a totally readjusted targeting model as well. We've got lots of clients target lots of different industries. Training is a perfect example for that. Company might be targeting 50 or 60 different industries, but overnight, in some cases, that the profile of the industries that are going to be appropriate will have changed. Some of those industries just won't be thinking about training right now. Some of them will have huge layoffs, for example, or businesses being put into sort of dormant state to kind of ride out the lockdown. And then so you've got this kind of huge amount of work that's coming before we even get into messaging. Once we've got revised business models, revised targeting, we're on for how we're wording the emails. But actually, there's again within that, there's an almost more important exercise of positioning the products or service as part of your target's response to the COVID-19 situation. How are you able to support other businesses improve their trading position, improve their whatever it is that you do? How does that weave into the solution to the current situation that we're all in? Because I guarantee you it's at the top of everybody's list at the moment. Nobody's there, business as usual, not affected at all. There's all, in every case, there's either firefighting or an opportunity or something that's different that's needing to be done in response to this situation. So it's about weaving into and presenting to how you can be part of that solution, and then the last then is to polish that message. The last step to put it in a format that's not going to offend somebody and catch them at the wrong time.
It's interesting because I mean, if you look at there's a lot of digital banking solutions and things like Revolut and ClearScore and then Tide and all these other kind of financial kind of products and services. They've actually changed a lot of their communications to be about how to save during COVID, how to manage your finances. So rather than kind of pushing on a level of service, if you look on the TV right now, there are more and more adverts which are related to how supermarket trying to contribute towards the overhaul or getting through the whole COVID-19 process. So the strategy is more in a space of support as opposed to sell, but through that there is this opportunity of being able to put this kind of underlying mark in someone's mind. I mean, opportunistic. Facebook have the one of the best things right now. I mean, Zoom could start advertising right now and in a lot of places, and they'll kind of increase their footprint and sales. Facebook with Portal, for example, is something that's coming out, and you're seeing more and more advertising on these kind of areas. I think, when I talk about communications, one of the things that we've done here at Enterprise Lab is we've stopped communicating in a way of actually saying, this is what you need to buy from us, or these are the services that we can offer to you, and being more kind of, I guess what Piers was saying, a little bit more, not sympathetic, but empathetic towards this kind of process. Where are you in your process? How can we help you? Is there anything else that you particularly need? The underlining thing about this is building a strategy that's going to allow you to start to convert a prospect to a client in about 90 or 100 days time. What advice do you give, Ryan, and I'll come to you, Piers, on the same question. What advice would you give about developing that kind of strategy? Because you've got clients that, obviously your team are working with right now, and they're building strategies in between about who they're targeting, what verticals they're going into, what they're going to be trying to upload. What kind of advice are you, as Sopro, are you giving to your clients about trying to capture this prospect pipeline, which you can then go and convert in about 100 days time?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question around, the topic that we're discussing now really is, it's digital strategies. And I was thinking, well, actually, kind of right now, is there even such a thing as a non-digital strategy? And I think that, because obviously there's other parts of your strategy than just marketing, but when you look at the marketing channels available, businesses might have been running 10 or 12 different channels to market, even as recently as 6 weeks ago. We're talking, the PR and awards circuit offline at the moment, direct mail, people aren't in their offices receiving mail, networking dinners, events not happening, outdoor display ads, billboards, no footfall, telesales to a greater extent is, unless you've got a huge database of mobile phone numbers, people aren't in the office, available on their phones. You've got trade shows, exhibitions, offline, PPC, very much online. We're experiencing, and I don't know how this fits with your experience, but we're experiencing a higher cost per lead by about 50% at the moment through our paid search, so just Google traffic, and we've got sort of display ads mixed in that campaign as well. But so there's definitely traffic, but perhaps because of all the other channels being offline, more budget being diverted into paid search, higher cost per click, radio audiences down, that commuter hour not there anymore for a lot of people. And then you've got the digital channels, really sort of content and SEO booming at the moment. For us, email prospecting to be one of those channels that's there, relatively unaffected, certainly operationally not affected at all. Got the sensitivity point to take into consideration, but once you overcome that, really we're representing a pretty reliable, low-cost channel to market. Social media, I think, is seeing a lot of social activity, a lot of social amplification of COVID-specific content that's being pushed to websites at the moment. I think that's dominating LinkedIn at the moment. And then obviously things like running webinars. We're talking about really key issues at the moment, and I think people want to hear it. And it's so there's kind of this total reframing of all the channels available to you, and I think that's it's not really what is an ideal strategy at the moment. It is, of those 12 channels that were available 2 months ago, I've got 2 or 3 available right now that we need to be maximising. We need to be doing it right now, and the advice is just to kind of keep moving forward as fast as you can with business development where you're able to do so. Just because every day that you're yeah, there is going to be commercial downside to the business at some point. However long your sales cycle is, it's going to hit you in 6 weeks, 6 months, or whatever your deal cycle is.
And Piers, just to kind of bring you in on that on that point. I mean, based on what Ryan's talking about, yeah, again, the message is still being reiterated. Keep going. You've got to, maybe rather than have 15 channels, you're going to have 2. It's identifying which are the most prolific and effective channels. That's, I guess, where Ryan's coming from with this in terms of your digitization strategy. And where does this kind of fall within kind of?
Yeah, well, I mean, so Ryan's made some great points there, and I particularly I noted that I agree with the point about reframing your channels, because what is clear to me is that an awful lot of people are just not in the mood. We've really got to accept that.
Yeah.
And no matter how great your words and how great your copywriting and your messaging and so on, people are just not in the mood. And I think there's, we've got to understand and come back to something we've spoken a lot about over the last 3 weeks or so, is the context of this, which is people are in shock. People are in denial. People have had their businesses wiped out. People have lost loved ones. We're into tens of thousands of people who have been immediately affected with death, for people who are grieving. There's a process we've got to go through here, which is, we're on day 25 of the lockdown. That is not a long time. Of course, business has got to carry on. And, if you look at what's happening in America, for example, they're in this terrible crisis of conflict between economy and humanitarian issues. Economic and humanitarian. Do we save people? Do we save our businesses? The Americans are battling with that. And I think everyone is, to be honest. But I think the thing I often try and come back to is, back to basics. Try and use common sense. Sadly, common sense is not that common, as we know. It's one of my favorite expressions. But I think, it's really understanding the context and the conversation that's going on in people's minds. Know your customers. If you know your customers, you'll understand what they're in the mood for. If you're in the DIY and home decorating business, that's probably quite a buoyant market at the moment. But don't go sort of ramming, bog-offs and 2-for-1 deals and so on. Because, people are just not in that mood. Try and find ways to help people. Everyone wants help and support. And I think, what I found is communities have come together a lot more. So is there more, depending on the business you're in, can you leverage relationships in your community to support and build the reputation of your business? I would say Enterprise Labs is now perceived, and always has been perceived, as a company that helps people. You put a huge amount of resource into this, and people are enjoying it. So I think it's about, first and foremost, is understand people are not in the mood for this. I think a phrase you use, support people, don't sell to them. You are selling to them inadvertently, because you're putting your message out. You are maintaining front of mind. But reframing those channels. I mean, exactly as Ryan was saying. I mean, things like outdoor media. The footfall's not there, so why would you put money on billboards? Telesales probably not going to work, because people don't want to be bothered. We're in a very different world at the moment. We'll come out of this, but I just think it's common sense approach. Personalization is a key one here. So you really need to get to know your customers better, and if you don't know them well enough, you shouldn't be able to market to them.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really brilliant point. And just coming back to that, Ryan, I think I mean, with my experience of the work that you guys do at SoPro is, it's really about also building the pipeline of prospects as you go along. So sometimes when I'm sitting down and working out the strategies and stuff like that with your team, it's predominantly thinking about which verticals that we want to go into, how many prospects we want to reach out of this. And a lot of the time, people obviously, even let's go pre-COVID-19, forget COVID's there. We used to be in this environment where people would get pissed off basically if you sent them what looked like an unsolicited email. So someone that you've never spoken to before in your life, they don't even know who you are, and normally you can get a high response rate of, why are you contacting me, and who are you, and how did you get my details, to a certain extent. Do you think there needs to be even more sensitivity to this if you were doing something like that right now? I mean, Piers just highlighted that people are going through trauma. The last thing they want to do is have an offer shoved in their face. Yet, or do you think people are actually becoming a little bit more open to being communicated to? Because I tell you why. Of the prospecting work that we've done together, as SoPro and Enterprise Lab, we've got a huge amount of data of people who perhaps haven't engaged with us so effectively when we were pre sort of COVID-19. Yep. We've got that data now, and we've actually been doing more relational work with them, in terms of, and actually we're finding that they're more receptive to picking up our emails. They're quite appreciative of the contact. So I'm seeing a behavior change actually from people feeling like you are an irritant or an irritant to actually now being a little bit more kind of open and supportive. What's your kind of take on that?
Yeah, so it does exist. I mean, there are, and so you will have had experience of that from the campaign that we were running for you, and there's a kind of a magnified visibility of that. From our perspective, you've got sites of sort of several hundred client campaigns, and and those. You are every now and then you're going to receive somebody, a response from somebody who's, not too happy that you've contacted them. Yeah, it might be where did you get my details from? Well, I think the GDPR played a big part in that, because there was a hugely misunderstood sort of side of GDPR around the regulations of kind of whose data you could have and couldn't have. And obviously there's, you guys will know there's a B2B exemption, which it's not the same as B2C marketing, but a lot of people are not aware of that. So yeah, that has really subsided in the kind of months and years post the GDPR switch. Are we getting more of those now? No, we're not. What we are getting slightly more of is, and I put it down to people having a bad day in most cases. You can see the language that's it's very abrupt sometimes. And people are they just want to vent. I think in some cases they are stressed, and they are quite rightly just dealing with kind of very difficult situations. They've got other priorities, and actually they are not interested in whatever you're going to put in front of them, whether they need it or not in some cases.
I'll just jump on a point. I think it's very true. I mean, an awful lot of digital marketing is all about authenticity. And people are, we underestimate the intelligence of buyers, both consumers and businesses. People are sharp. They won't stand for this crap. If you're trying to put out a message of sympathy and support, but it's a sort of covert method of trying to flog something to them, that's just going to piss people off. And I'll give you an example of this. I won't say the name. I was on a webinar last week with a very well-respected speaker, and it was huge, and it was some very good content. But about 2/3 of the way into this came the pitch, and I went switched off, and I went, oh, for God, I'm not interested. I want to be sold to. So that's to me ruined credibility, because it's not being authentic. And I think digital marketing is about authenticity. We live in a world where we can create this facade around our businesses and our products and our propositions, but people don't want to be fooled anymore. People want their privacy respected, and they want their authenticity. They want people who are genuine and real. So the advice I'd say to anyone in terms of your messaging, just make sure you're authentic. That's a really big lesson to be learned. If you're not, you'll have a short life in business.
And actually, you mentioned, Ryan, about GDPR and stuff like that. Ered's kind of come on board and said, with GDPR, don't customers expect fewer emails as they come to terms with the shock of COVID-19? GDPR obviously was something which a lot of people maybe didn't quite fully understand, had to kind of embrace to a certain extent. Do you think things like GDPR are going to change now as we move out of this this sort of process? Because I think there is going to be a kind of a mass, not exodus, but a mass rush for people to try and remarket to people. So there are going to be times where people feel like their privacy has been infringed. I mean, or do you think it's going to magnify and become even more scrutinized? How do you think that's going to play out?
And we've been wrestling with this ourselves as well, and it's pretty important that we have as much foresight as possible on any potential regulatory changes. The rules as they are at the moment, and actually, so GDPR is really the rule around being able to process and store somebody's data, but it's not what comes into play from a marketing point of view. It's actually the PECR regulation that is the key one, which was actually in place prior to GDPR. GDPR didn't change that. I think the focus at the moment, you've got the pandemic has taken over, really state focus, just almost across the board at the moment. Obviously, the regulatory departments are functioning, but in terms of kind of policy development, I don't really expect anything this side of exiting the European Union, for example, or sorry, this side of that transition period. We've got, obviously, we're moving forward with all of the current laws that we've got in place, and then at some point that the country will be thinking about whether we need to change our data privacy laws in the future. Right now, I can't even, it's too far in the future with everything that's going on to be looking at that. I don't expect anything to change anytime soon.
And then sort of, we talked about authenticity in your messaging. I think let's switch this the other way around now from the perspective of a marketer. There's a lot of businesses, especially small businesses, micro businesses, where you've got small business owners who are not really professional marketers. They don't really understand the whole process of marketing, how marketing strategy developed. Like you say, they could have had their stuff copywritten by another professional. They usually aren't the type of people who tend to understand how the process of marketing takes place. What advice would you have to people, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh there, but what advice would you have for people who have build up this expectation that if they're going to build this type of strategy and go out and start to continuously market and be authentic, that it doesn't mean that everyone's going to come flooding to you, and that your open rates are going to go through the roof and your conversion rates are going to go through. What's the distinctive advice? And Piers, I would like you to sort of come in on this as well. What distinctive advice would you have there? Because telling someone be authentic is like telling someone add salt to taste. It's a very
it's a good point, Ken. I mean, one of the things which I've always believed in marketing is consistency. So that builds authenticity as well. So it'll be interesting to see how many companies in 3 or 4 months' time are still saying the same messages they're saying today.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there'll be that many. And I'm a simple guy, so I always take a simple approach, and I always go back to basics. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And there's way too much, innovation, and let's do this and we can do that and we can do this and we can do that. Yeah, come back to basics. Just be consistent. If you genuinely got a product or a service or a solution to someone's problem, just stick with that. And the way to build on authenticity is to be consistent with that. So it's repetition of that message, the same thing, just driving it home, not in an invasive way, but just in a persuasive way. And I think, that's why GDPR is fundamentally there to protect people's privacy, because I do think, the marketing world became a little bit too, it's a little bit too intrusive. And I think we are so bombarded with messaging, and it's very competitive out there, and differentiating messages is very difficult. But that consistency, I think, is a very key part of any marketing approach, is, find something that works and just refine it and tweak it. Don't change it necessarily, and don't automatically try and find brand new ways to do things, because perhaps there's not a brand new way to do something, and you can ruin your reputation quite quickly.
Wow, it's a brilliant point, and kind of, Ryan, perhaps you could pick up on this with the different verticals that SoPro work with as well. If you look at the airline industry right now, you're not really seeing many adverts for Virgin or British Airways or anything like that coming out, in terms of their sales, obviously, because they can't sell tickets and that. Whereas you've got supermarkets now, the chains are a lot more kind of front and center, talking about how they're feeding the nations and getting supplies going on, etc. You're seeing a lot of restaurants not obviously promoting anything in their way, shape or form. So the amount of adverts that you see for McDonald's, for example, have disappeared because they're all shut. Do you think this is going in line with what Piers is saying is the fact that actually, because they can't really give anything authentic as a message right now, it's better to stop, to slow down their communication, or not to really be saying anything until this kind of lockdown and the measures are being moved up. So are you expecting to see an abundance of travel companies coming through and starting to want to prospect with people once lockdown measures are taken away, because right now they haven't got anything authentic to say?
Yeah, so I think a few points there. So last one, definitely. However, we're working with travel businesses right now that are functioning effectively, because they've transformed their proposition to literally looking at far enough in the future. Selling into businesses and consumer side for sort of next year, etc. So there are opportunities even in those kind of hugely adversely affected sectors. We did an exercise actually. This is a few weeks ago, where we pulled a team together inside the business to look at and for us it was all of the B2B industry. So it's about 65 industries that we looked at. And we wanted to get a sense of how those industries are going to be affected from a supply side and from a demand side, because actually it's a requirement for both of those things to be to be there for businesses to be able to function as usual. And actually kind of doing that gave us a lot of insight into there's certain businesses with no real reduction in demand, or maybe even increase in demand, but actually no ability to operate. You mentioned restaurants. I mean, everybody would, myself included, I'd love a Big Mac right now, but there's no possibility of anybody being able to deliver one. So you've got increased demand, reduced ability to supply scenarios. You've got reduced demand but ability to supply scenarios, in which case we've got propositions that need to be adjusted to satisfy different demand or position the business in different ways. So there's a whole hodgepodge of fallout, but it's happening by industry. So looking at the different verticals, calibrating your messaging, and we think of it more as a selling into those verticals perspective than being in the verticals selling out just naturally. But we do look at both viewpoints. But yeah, look, we tend to kind of look at calibrate the messaging and the targeting by vertical. So for each client that we're working with, we'll be taking maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 industries that might be in scope, and looking at the response rates, looking, are there industries that we're seeing higher percentages of disgruntled recipients that are not happy to receive a message? And actually, what are we learning for that? Well, actually, we can apply that across 100 different clients and switch off this sector or that sector, because it's really, it's getting very limited results and potentially annoying people. Whereas other sectors are business as usual. We've got a matrix. There's a lot of sectors that are up right now. More response.
Right, it's an interesting point actually, because in retail people say they vote with their feet. In digital people vote with delete. And for me, I can tell you, we don't know a lot of the fallout and the messaging we're getting wrong, because people just delete it, and that just they will never tell you. They won't feedback on it. You'll never know. Yes, your response rates may go down, but you will never know whether it's been effective or not. So it's it's interesting when we talk about sort of creating or revising digital strategies here, because I think the first thing comes back to really getting to know the market and the customer and the people you're talking to, understand that conversation. And I think, if I was setting a strategy now, I'd go back to, for me, I keep it simple. I go back to basics, and it would be to try and find the 1 or 2, 3 things that are working, and pretty much I'd be briefing all of my team on the messaging and the word I want to put out has to come from a place of sympathy, empathy, compassion, understanding, and start with that. Because as I said, I still am getting lots and lots of emails. Interestingly, Kat, I'm getting emails from airlines. So American Airlines, very heavy on the marketing now, which is good. It's not threatening, not saying book a flight, here's a buy one get one. They're just keeping in touch, because we will fly again. And guess what? When we come out of lockdown, I want to hop on a plane and go on holiday. I can't wait. And I've got a multitude of airlines to choose from. And I'm going to go with the ones that keep in touch with me, the ones that support me, the ones who I believe are consistent and authentic. Yeah. So, I think that, for me, there are sort of 4 key things that I would say to any marketeer out there in their business right now, which is, number 1, be authentic. And the way to be authentic is just don't lie, don't bullshit, just be very open, very honest with people. Be consistent with number 2, be creative in your messaging and be flexible with the approach and try to understand more. Use this as a learning period to build relationships. Sorry, I just dived in with a whole bunch of stuff there. So
that's and kind of coming back to the strategies. I mean, these are the kind of core tactics within your strategy. I think ultimately, I guess what we're saying here is you're not building a strategy to right now to make immediate sales. You're actually creating more of a harvesting strategy. It's kind of building that kind of eat prospect as a nut, which you're harvesting away right now, and you're gonna, I guess, Ryan, what we've got to look at here is nurturing those prospects over a longer period of time now, depending on what's going to happen situationally with COVID. Today, we learned through the news that actually the numbers in the UK aren't exactly correct, that there were more deaths, and obviously because the system goes backwards. China is now looking at a second level of breakout, which is coming, which which they're kind of working against, but that's because of people coming in now into the country with it, so it's not happening now. There's going to be some things that are going to change now, whether it's a country then decides to have an additional 2 weeks or 3 weeks of lockdown. That's going to have an impact right the way through to someone like New Zealand, for example, who are reversing, and they're saying that they're about to come out of lockdown because of what they've done. That's going to have a mental impact on people. How important is it that strategy needs to be fluid over this period of next 30, 60, 90 days, that people need to be more responsive to what's going on around them, rather than just kind of come out and say, right, okay, this is my next 3 months. This is how I want to talk to my prospects. This is how authentic I want to be. How important is it from a marketer's perspective, or a company that does this kind of prospecting, that your strategy is very fluid over the next sort of period?
Yeah, so the advice that we're giving our clients is, I mean, we tend to steer people to sort of split out their sort of strategy and their tactics, and inform your strategy with the facts, and then have the tactics ready for the situation as it evolves and as it unfolds. I think you can make certain assumptions, and we can make assumptions around likely timescales and stuff, but the reality is we don't know how long things are going to be like this, or we don't know. We could take a step further towards a more severe level of lockdown, for example, rather than taking a step back, and so because of that, we tend to plan for the worst, hope for the best. What is the worst? Well, the worst is it's kind of no crowds for a prolonged period of time, no international travel, the international supply chain disruption that we're seeing, home working only, potentially increased sickness across staff up to sort of 20%. I think the advice is on worst case for that. This sort of full lockdown scenario prolonging. Can your business, the model that you're putting in place now, actually function profitably and effectively within the current conditions? Given that you don't have a defined end date, actually, I think it's important for certainly businesses with very short deal cycles that are going to be feeling the pain much quicker. That actually they adjust to that level of being able to operate in these conditions. So I would say take your strategy that far.
Yeah, I mean, just to build this, I mean, a lot of people should remind themselves, marketing is a journey, not a destination. Yeah. It's way too much of this instant gratification, and people want immediate sales, immediate response. You have to go through the various touch points over time to build that relationship with the customer. My advice to any business person out there is lean into this. You know, we will fly again. We will come out of this. The sun will shine. It'll be a different place. But you know what? We'll get through it. Okay. Just be prepared for that day when we do finally get through it. And the way to do that, from, in my view, is leaning into this crisis. You know, don't be timid. Find your confidence. Find the things that work for you. You know, build a theme around for your propositions and your messaging that people can relate to. Once you find something people relate to, build on that. You know, do more of it. Be consistent with this. Just do more and more and more, and build the relationships, because this journey will be with us for a while. You know, and my message from my business is all about compassion, empathy, and understanding. We'll get there eventually. If it's a year or 3 months, you know, who knows? But you know, we will probably see second waves of lockdowns come out. You know, don't be led into a false dawn here. You know, so just be consistent throughout this process, but lean into the crisis. Don't be timid.
So the last area that I want to talk about then, and I've purposely left it towards the end, how do you express that emotion, that integrity, that authenticity through an email? Because it's very two-dimensional. It's very flat. You know, it's words. There isn't any form of expression as it goes. So when you look at social media and you look at particular posting, you could use graphics and some sort of animation to create some sort of emotional impact or effect. If you look at digital marketing from a social perspective, it's things like videos, which kind of generate that kind of inspiration or whatever it needs to be. What about when you're doing things just flat like emails? I mean, I know, Piers, you mentioned about, you know, an airline that's contacting you regularly, you know, and there is so much wording that you could put in or use particular type of copy. But Ryan, it's a tough question.
Well, no. I mean, so okay. I mean, apart from, you know, if you can afford it, go and get a really good copywriter. But yeah, that aside, we can't all have that. But my view when it comes to, you know, crafting, whether it's emails or sort of any form of messaging, is to firstly keep it short and simple. You know, don't have loads and loads of narratives. There's a lot we could say here, okay, but don't. Keep it simple. Keep it quite pithy and to the point. But I think more open statements. So the messaging that I'm reading are things that are, you know, open-ended. They're getting into my mindset and they're making me think. And if I can relate to that company because they're making me think about them, myself, my business, my relationship, just be open. Don't go for the hard sell. Now is the time to do soft selling, asking lots of questions. Storytelling, we hear an awful lot about storytelling. You know, find things that people can relate to. You know, so tell a personal story. So I've received some fantastic emails from business leaders who are demonstrating extraordinary leadership and enormous compassion because they're demonstrating they understand, they get it, you know, and that's the test of any good leader, is to lead from behind. You know, show people you really understand the grassroots, what's going on, and reflect that in your messaging. So keep it simple, use lots of open statements, get people thinking.
Brian, what was your that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with all of those points. Actually, I think there's probably a split. You know, in terms of direct outreach, you do have some brand building exercises that are still going, and I think probably the communication, you know, and yeah, more B2C than B2B. I think, but yeah, certainly still exists, and we still do sort of newsletters and that kind of stuff. Which is more about maintaining provenance and you know, giving people supportive access to perhaps supportive content, or yeah, you know, just staying front of mind. And then I think there's in a lot of cases there's business development teams, salespeople that need to hit targets, you know, this month, next month, and actually there is a lot of businesses, just from a cash flow point of view, short-term deal making, you know, it needs to be done one way or another. So it's, you know, how do we do those messages effectively that we're wrestling with? Personalization really comes into play. We'll often see messages that look like they've been you know, finely polished and, you know, beautifully written and could fit on the, you know, on the best websites, and really great descriptive of products or services, you know, features, benefits, etc. But those really don't hit in an email marketing scenario. You've got to get as far away from that as possible. You're not going to sell a product or a service in an email. You're never going to do that. The email's job is there to get you on a call. It was, 6 weeks ago, it was to get you on a meeting in front of somebody or into the office, but all of that's now video calls and phone calls. And yeah, a quick, 1 or 2 lines, just nice personal messages that drop a bit of logic in for why you want to get in touch. I think you might be able to help with whatever it is that your solution is, your products or services.
I'll tell you something that I think is quite interesting is, I got on Thursday, I got 1 email, and I get an awful lot of emails, only 1 email wishing me a happy Easter. And I was surprised by that. And I think, some of the major and sort of more prolific brands that are out there need to be very careful about this, because I can think of 4 individuals who are business leaders who will come out of this crisis being remembered for the things they didn't do. People like Stelios, Philip Green, Tim Weatherspoon, Richard Branson. These guys will be remembered for things they haven't done, the way they've acted. Whereas people like James Dyson, the owners of Marriott Hotel, putting £10 million worth of rooms available for NHS and for key workers. They're the things that people will remember. They're the brands that people want to associate with. So really important to understand, that you'll be remembered for the things that you do during this crisis. And, just I'll come back to that thing about compassion, authenticity, really get into the mindsets that people you're dealing with. Show them you care.
And ironically, guys, that's not a digital strategy. That's a psychological thing. I think what's important here to understand is, no matter what you do from a digitization point, whether you're using different tools, techniques, or products online to get your prospects, if you don't have the right psychology strategy put into place, it's only going to be as good as the stuff that you put into it. So we're fast coming out of time here. Time does fly when we're having kind of fun. I mean, this has been an intense conversation, and I like it to start this week on digitization and disruption, to have this kind of open conversation. But Ryan, what kind of lasting bit of advice would you have to anyone out there right now who's in their business, looking at it thinking, right, I haven't really been doing much on my marketing front. I've listened to what Ryan has said already, the fact that I need to keep going with this, or fear losing somewhere down the sales pipeline. What's the last bit of advice that you would give right now?
Yeah, without a doubt, I think it's just a case of do not batten down the hatches. I think we've seen, already seen businesses sort of take that approach and already, start to fail and reverse out. You've got to take you've got to grab this by the scruff of the neck and do, a really proactive job of making the best of a very difficult situation. That does involve changing your proposition. In a lot of cases, it almost certainly involves changing your targeting. It will, the industries that you're focused on, the messaging that you're using, everything will be different, but the important thing is to keep moving. The channels that you're using, there are still channels there, digital channels that are working effectively as they ever were. Make the most of those, and there's a business development pipeline out there to be had. I think is my advice.
Amazing. And then Piers, adding on to the fact about being compassionate, being authentic, and kind of being a leader, especially kind of from a small business perspective, I think, rather than the larger kind of organizations. I mean, we've talked a lot about airlines and people like that, how they're talking, etc. What 1 other or 2 other things would you advise to a small business right now who's kind of thinking, right, okay, these guys are saying to me, this is what I've got to go away and do.
Yep.
What else should they consider here?
Well, I think to Ryan's earlier point about reframing the channels, I think any business owner, whether you're a small business or a big multinational business, recognizes that we have an enormous amount of channels open to us. And one of the great things about digital is the barrier to entry is low, and the cost entry is relatively low as well. So my advice would be to use every channel that's out there and available to you from a social point of view. Use Facebook, use LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter, WhatsApp, do podcasts, do videos, send texts, send emails, do all of those things because they're all available to you. Personalize as much as you possibly can. But I think reframe the channels and find a way to communicate with your customers. Do not go silent. Lean into this. Don't be timid. Use every channel out there you can to communicate with your people being your customers. Because ultimately they will remember you for this. And if you get the right message, they'll come back to you. Pick the phone up, perhaps even ring a customer. It's quite a strange thing to hear a phone ringing. I'm old school, Ket. But, things like WhatsApp. It's quite strange. WhatsApp is a bit more of a social tool. It's not really used a lot in business, but WhatsApp, your customers, why not?
Amazing. But we have run out of time. We are not running out of time. We have run out of time. Piers, thank you as always for being there, kind of a resident expert. Ryan, amazing to have you on. And I know we're going to have you on again soon, talking about alternative strategies and the art of communication in your digital strategies. But I really appreciate the time that you've taken out and the level of expertise that you brought in. Guys, if you are interested in learning more about prospecting, go and check out SoPro. And this isn't a sales pitch in any way, shape or form. It is purely on the fact that these guys have an abundance of resource, and they're an award-winning company, and they really do care. So it's really important that we are all collective together, working together in to get ourselves out of this kind of period of uncertainty and sort of business downtime. But that's it for today. Our next webinar is coming up tomorrow. We have two, one in the morning around high performance teams, and then we've got Saurabh Bhargava from Chicago, who's going to be joining us to talk about why it's important to digitize your business. So not digitize strategies, but more about digitization of your business.
I'll vouch for him. He's a great.
Piers going to vouch for him. I want to bet that Piers is going to be on that call as well.
Absolutely.
But Ryan, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Getan.
For everyone else that's been watching out there, thank you for joining us. If you have only come into this halfway through, don't worry, there's a recording coming up, and the resource center is going to be available soon. And we will we'll catch up with you on the other side. But for now, stay home, stop the spread, save lives. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Getan.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.